Guys, Robot1 here, coming at you with a new Yu-Gi-Oh video, and in today's Yu-Gi-Oh video, we are going to be doing a Yu-Gi-Oh Good or Bad, a segment on my channel where I talk about cards that I think could be good, but could also be really bad at the same time. And also, this card that we're talking about today is basically, it's a card that I've been hearing a lot of discussion about, and it's a card that I've been wanting to talk about purely because the amount of discussion that's been going around about it between the people I know, between people who think it's really good, people who think it's really bad. Like, I've been seeing a lot of discussion about this card, and I wanted to give my personal thoughts and opinions on this through the Yu-Gi-Oh! Good or Bad segment. So, without further ado, let's get talking about this card. So the card we're going to be talking about today is the new Pot of Indulgence card. The card that we got announced to us, well, the effect announced to us last week, and I wanted to essentially discuss its good points, its bad points, what decks it can be used in, and so on and so forth, to basically come to a conclusion of, is this card good or is it bad? And obviously I've got the scaling thing where I go good, bad, decent, meh, and okay. And yeah, so we'll be doing that at the end. But yeah, so so what does Pot of Indulgence do, first of all? All of you are saying it draws cards, but it actually has more than that. Like Pot of Desires, it has more. But its effect is at the start of your main phase 1, so you can only activate this at the very beginning of your main phase 1. You can't activate it after you've activated another card. It has to be the first card you use. Banish either 3 or 6 of your face down extra deck cards randomly. Okay, so you have to shuffle your extra deck. So a little annoying for you OCD players out there who don't like to shuffle their extra deck up randomly, and draw randomly face down, so you have to banish them all face down as well. Draw 1 card for every 3 cards you banished. Also, you cannot draw cards with this card's effect for the rest of the, with card effects for the rest of the turn. So, from what we've got from this, you can only activate it during your main phase, the start of your main phase 1. So you can't activate it in main phase 2, you can't activate it after you've activated another card. For every 3 cards you banish face down from your extra deck, most 6, and the limit at least 3, you get to draw a card. So, you're drawing 2 cards from this card. And also, they're banished face down, and it's random, so you don't get to choose. And finally, you're not able to use any draw effects for the rest of the turn. So no Pot of Desires, no True Draco Heritage, no Demise, no Upstart Goblin, none of that. You're not allowed to use any of those effects. Not even Engage. You can't draw off Engage. You cannot draw cards with the effects of... you can't draw off Engage, but you can still search with Engage. That's still allowed because of the draw is an additional effect. So you can still get that. But what does this card basically do? Well, let's talk about the good points of this card to begin with, because obviously talking about the good points is better than talking about the bad points right away. So, what are the good points about this card? Well, obviously the good points about this card is that it lets you draw 2 cards, letting you go further into your deck, getting you to cards that you could potentially need to advance your game state. Now, being able to draw those 2 cards can be very useful, and because of being able to draw those cards very useful, it basically increase your game state and increase the amount of plays you can actually make. Say you're playing a deck such as, I don't know, Trickster, and you open all hand traps, you ain't got anything else, and all you can actually do is, you know, just use hand traps. Say you open that Pot of Indulgence, though, that you can banish 6 random cards from your deck, draw 2 cards, and attempt to get to either a Candina, a Light Stage, a Terraforming, a Scapegoat to have some more defense. You can potentially have a ton of resources just from those 2 draws. That's why having a +1 like this in a deck can be really good. And what decks can actually utilize this? Because those are good points around this card as well. What decks can utilize this card to its fullest outside with that additional +2? Well, For starters, decks like Autogeist can utilize this very well. They're able to utilize this because they don't have a lot of extra deck cards that they really need to rely on. Because the majority of extra deck cards that they rely on is mainly a Linkuriboh, a Karen Rushka, and Hextia. Those are really the only free Link monsters the deck relies on, unless it's able to go into a Borreload or a Boros Sword at times, and that's all the deck really does with its extra deck. And honestly, Autogeist don't even have a lot of draw cards, so they're able to utilize the effect of Pot of Indulgence even more than a lot of other decks. Another deck that I just mentioned, Trickstar, they can utilize it very well because they don't need to care about the extra deck. They don't have a ton of draw cards outside of maybe Pot of Desires if they're running it, or an Upstart Goblin, because the majority of the time they're using stuff like Terraforming, they're using stuff like Candina, they're using stuff like Light Stage to get to the cards they need to get to be able to play the game more better. Another deck that could utilize this card is Invoked, because Invoked mainly revolve around their Madness Invoker to search cards, and they mainly revolve around getting cards through like Meltdown, Terraforming, and even Alistair itself to get the invocation to the hand. And it also can rely on the Mech Knights as well to be able to search with Blue Sky and Purple Nightfall to get to bigger Mech Knights to have a bigger standing of monsters on the board. So those are some decks that can actually utilize the card very well without having to care. Now obviously there's bad points in that as well, because you have to banish cards from your extra deck, but we're not talking about those right now. We'll talk about those in a minute. So those are very good points to the card. Pot of Indulgence gives you that +1. It's a card that instantly gives you a +1, and any card in the game that gives you a +1 does have a lot of power in the game. For instance, Pot of Desires, which banishes 10 cards, which sure can be very detrimental to your deck, but even though you're banishing those 10 cards, getting that +1 can essentially give you the advantage in the game to go further in the game. Why some decks are running 3 of them at the right now? Because of that. And having a +1 in a deck is also a very good reason for this card to be a very good card. Because just any card that, as I said, any card that can give you a +1 is going to be decent in some way, shape, or form. It's going to be very, very good. So, we've talked about the decks that can utilize it. We've talked about why it's a good card in general, and why the +1 mechanic is very, very good for this card. So those are the main good points, because it can be used in a decent amount of decks. It can be used to advance your game state, and if you don't have an extra... Also, another good point of the card is, if your extra deck is irrelevant, and you don't run a lot of draw support, the card is going to be amazing. The card is just going to do so much for you, just having that +1 in general. So that's another reason, because it's really good in non-extra deck decks. Well, decks that don't really care about their extra deck and don't really play a lot of draw power. The card is very good in those areas, because it's able to be utilized in a decent amount of decks which don't need extra deck potential and have a lot more searches than draws. It's able to get that +1, which is so important in cards nowadays. That's why Pot of Greed is banned, because it's a free +1. And you've got to, and also the amount of power that a +1 can actually utilize to advance your game state and give you a better hand also is a very good point to go into this card. But those are the good points. So what are the bad points to this card, though? So, well, let's talk about that. So the first bad point to this card is you have to use it at the start of your main phase 1. Now, having to use it at the start of your main phase 1 is a very big problem for cards like this, because if you're playing a deck that utilizes a load of draw support, you're not going to be able to use that at all, because the card has a built-in lock to that. So it's like it has a built-in sort of semi-draw lock bird if you use this card's effect, because you're not able to draw any more cards for the rest of the turn off stuff like Pot of Desires or any other sort of draw card in the deck like Upstart Goblin. So it does give you that hindrance there, where if you're running a lot of true draw cards like in True Draco, like something I've been hearing a lot about this card is that it's going to be broken in True Draco. It won't be broken in True Draco, because the True Draco deck utilizes, like, I would say 50% draw power. Like, honestly, let's look at it. We've got Heritage, we've got Heritage, we've got Demise, we've got Pot of Desires, we've got Upstart. We've got so many draw cards in that deck that a majority of the consistency is coming from those draw cards. So having an effect having a semi-drawn lockbird built into the card is going to weaken the deck, any deck that plays this. So if you're playing a deck that utilizes cards like Demise, Pot Desires, Upstart Goblin, or like Heritage, for instance, I would say this is a very bad card to play in that deck, and that's a bad point to the card, because I've been hearing a lot of people saying that this card is good in True Draco, when it really is not. It's not good in True Draco whatsoever. Unless you're playing a build that doesn't play any Heritage, Demise, or Pot of Desires, then I don't know why you're playing True Draco, but whatever. And back to that main phase 1 point, because you have to use it at the start of your main phase 1, you're not able to utilize anything after it. Like, also, say you got this card of something like Pot of Duality that doesn't let you draw, that isn't a draw card to say, it's more of a search card, but if you've got this card of Pot of Duality, then you can't add it to hand to get that +1. You have to add something else because of you're not able to utilize it, because you can only use it at the start of your main phase 1. I feel like that's a very bad point, very bad restriction to the card, because it stops you from being able to use anything after. It stops you from being able to use it at any other point in time. It's like Heat Wave, that you can only use it at the start of your main phase 1, because then it stops you from being able to normal summon effect monsters, which is actually a very good point to the card as well, because of being able to, you know, you get a free effect monster when your opponent loses nothing is a big problem. And obviously, having a card like this that restricts your drawing capabilities and restricts your when you can play it has big problems to it. It adds problems to the card in general, and a lot of decks can't actually utilize this as well. Decks like, let's look at some decks that can't utilize this. True Draco, any deck with a draw card. I honestly can't think of a deck right now, because my mind. Actually, no, I can think of a deck, because of a big problem with the card is that it banishes cards at random. That's a bad point of the card as well, that I was actually forgetting for a second there. It banishing 3 to 6 cards from your extra deck at random is a very big problem for this card. Like, because if you're playing a deck like Pendulum Magicians, for instance, that needs every card in your extra deck to be able to be utilized, then you're screwed. You're absolutely screwed, because you're not going to be able to utilize those. You could lose your 1 Electromite, you could lose your 1 Dark Rebellion, you could lose your 1 Vortex or the 1 Absolute to go into your Vortex. You could lose key cards like these to be able to utilize an extra deck, and that's a big problem with the card, because in decks that need every card in the extra deck, this card is going to be rubbish. This card is going to be so bad in decks like that. And if you're running it and banish that 1 extra deck card that you need to win the duel, then that's going to be such a big problem for the card. Like, honestly, you need those cards like those to be able to play the game at times, and that's one of the biggest problems with the card, and that's what I'm conveying right now, that if you banish 6 cards from your extra deck randomly, not like Eater of Millions, where you get to be like, oh, I don't need you, I don't need you, I don't need you. Eater of Millions, just gobble them up. It's not going to be very good for you, because even in a deck like Invoked, that I said the card was actually decent in, if you manage to banish all 3 of your Mechaba, you're screwed. You're 100% screwed, and that's a big problem for the deck, and that's something I really wanted to mention for this card. Like, honestly, you banish those important extra deck cards, you're screwed. You're done. You're out of here. Like in Sky Striker, for instance, if you utilize this card because it has 1 draw card inside of well, 2 if you count Malphite's Fusion, inside of Engage, you use this card in that deck, and you banish 3 Kagari, or 3 Shizuku, or 3 Hayate, what are you going to do from there? What are you going to do from there? You've lost all your Kagari, you've lost all your Shizuku potentially, and you've lost the majority of them, so it takes away late game plays. Like, that's the problem with this card, and that's why this card, that I wanted to discuss this card, because this is one of the bigger problems of the card. That, well, like, it takes away random extra deck cards instead of being like Eater of Millions that can be like, get out of here, man! Get out of here, man! Eater, eat him! It takes away stuff like that, and that's one of the things that I wanted to mention. So, yeah, guys, that's the bad points of the card. It has to be activated during your main phase 1, so you can't do anything before the card, and if you somehow get it later on, and you're already in your main phase 1 past the start of it, you're not able to use it. Banishing random cards from your extra deck that you need to win the game can be a very big problem For instance, you could banish the Mechaba, you could banish the Kagari, you could banish the Electromite, you could banish all your Dark Claws if you're playing heroes. Get what I'm saying? And obviously, you can't use any draw effects after the card is activated. So there are bad points to the card, but there are also good points to the card. And like when you look up both of them, and you've got to think about the card in general, what's it good in, what's it bad in, what can it utilize best in? Like for instance, what it can be utilized best in, the best deck I would say this card is would be something like would be probably Altergeist, because they don't use any draw cards. They only have really 5 extra cards they need to utilize, and even if you lose those 5 extra cards, you don't really care. So looking at it from that point, this card does have utility in quite a few decks, but in general, what is this card? What is this card? Good, bad, decent, okay? I'm gonna have to give it a decent rating, honestly. Right down the middle, because it does have a lot of uses in other decks. It does have a lot of uses in decks that don't need their extra deck, like Trickstars, like Autogeist, like potentially Invoked, potentially other decks that don't need their extra deck. Like, it does have potential in these decks, but in general, in decks like True Draco that don't need an extra deck but run tons of draw power, in decks like Magicians, in decks like Sky Striker, in decks like any deck that draws cards or needs extra cards, the card is not good enough in general for that. So personally, in general, I would say the card is decent. I can't honestly give it a rating higher than decent, because because the card is just so punishing for what it is, and so locked into where you can play it, that it just hurts you more at times than it would help you. So personally, though, in other decks like Altergeist, the card is amazing. Like, the card can really do a lot in decks like that, but in other decks, the card is not good at all. So in general, the card is decent. Overall, it's just a decent card. It really is, guys. Like, the card just has so many detriments to it, has so many weaknesses for you that gives you, and honestly, I don't feel like I could give it a higher rating than this. But yeah, guys, what do you personally think of Pot of Indulgence? Do you think it's an amazing card? Do you think I'm wrong? Do you think it should be a good card? Do you think it should be a bad card? Do you think the card probably won't see any play, or do you think it'll be a secret rare like I do and will fetch a price of like £100 and ruin my wallet? But what do you guys personally think? Tell me all of that in the comment section below. Give me your thoughts and opinions. If you liked the video, don't forget to press the like button to see more Yu-Gi-Oh! Good or Bads on the channel. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to press the subscribe button to be subscribed for future content. And if you want to be notified of any of that content or streams that I do, which are normally at 8 PM UK time on Thursdays, don't forget to press the notification button to be notified of my streams or videos. But yeah, guys, Pot of Indulgence, it indulged us today. I'll see you later, guys. Robot1, signing out. Draw 2. Thanks for watching, guys, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on this video for more Yu-Gi-Oh! Videos, and check out the links in the description for the previous video, and the link to my Facebook page where you can see previous videos that I've posted there, and any other information that I may have posted there. I hope to see you guys next time, and thanks for watching.